Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Profitable Manufacturer. This is episode 11, and we're going to talk about Shark Tank Tales. I'm Annette Delancey. I'm the CEO of Cast Covers and She Makes Products, and also the co-host of The Profitable Manufacturer.
And I'm Jason Center, the other co-host of The Profitable Manufacturer and the owner of Aspire Advisors.
So we thought we'd talk about Shark Tank today because Shark Tank is all about manufacturing. It's all about people with ideas and the great American dream. And I have a lot of stories about Shark Tank, some of my own and some that I have learned and or been involved with on the fringe aspect. So basically, it's a show that I'm sure everybody's aware of, whether they've watched it or not. They're not. I'm a junkie. I'm a Shark Tank junkie because I've learned a lot actually about what investors look for. And I would oftentimes watch it and wonder, well, what kind of equity are they looking for now? Because they always have to come in with the pitch and pitch to a round table of very experienced business owners and who may or may not invest in their company. And so they would do a quick introduction about their product, and then they'd say, I'm looking for X percentage or Y investment. And then the sharks, which is typically 5 judges, 5 sharks, a male and female, would then pepper them with questions, and it's grueling. It's a grueling, and what we see for 10, 12 minutes is often cut down from an hour. And so you're standing on one spot, basically, getting grueled, and you're completely exposed because they will find out the flaws in your business. So it's not for the faint of heart, and it's very exciting, and the drama and the music, and they pause. And of course, they do a lot of video editing. So faces that are sometimes recorded are not necessarily at the same time when it happened, but it does make for a good TV show, good hour. And CNBC actually plays Shark Tank every night, every single night, which is great replay for the manufacturers. So my personal story is, and Cast Covers, I have a pair of crutch covers right here, crutch wear. But Cast Covers is my company, and we manufacture and distribute fun and functional products for orthopedic patients. So you think of covers for cast, braces, splints, slings, crutches, boots. And we're a 14-year-old company and had lots of ups and downs. And it was 10 years ago, maybe even longer, right when the show first started. So maybe it was 9 years ago. But anyway, I applied, and I got through all the way, and the paperwork that you have to put, it's quite a tomb of a file that you have to fill out. And then you go, and then you stand in line for an audition. And if they select you, then you have to file a whole bunch of other paperwork. And I think they've streamlined some of that process, but you still have to divulge a lot of your financials. And so you have to have your financials in ready. And that's what we're all about, is as the profitable manufacturers utilize the profit first method, so you can be profitable, so they can see that there's opportunity there. And what you're doing is you're giving a 1-minute pitch to basically people from the show, producers and staff, to see if there's some interest. And they're looking for obviously some special qualities. Not everybody has a great product. Not everybody has an exceptional personality. Not everybody, screams loud on the camera. There's just some things that they pick up, and they look for anything that would work well on TV. It could be somebody who might even lose their train of thought because it makes the pregnant pause even that much more, the friction level go up. So there's a lot of things that they look for. They've had a lot of food companies recently, in the last 5 years, which was never at the very beginning, which is interesting. So the foodies have really liked that. But so when I went through it and got through 3 rounds and then not on it, did not get on it. And then but I went through the process 3 different times also. And 3 times I went through it, and 3 times I didn't make it on the show. But what happened is I learned a lot about the show and how it works. and it just didn't work for whatever reason. That's fine. Now, Lori Grenier, who is a Shark Tank judge and is now an executive producer of the show, is actually a client of Cast Covers, and she has given us the social shout out for our products because she is a personal user of our products. It was a few years ago, but I tracked her down personally. It had nothing to do with Shark Tank. I just tracked her down, and but there was I was hired by this company, and the owner is a young man, and he had created a product. And he was young and in college and realized he was getting acne, and he realized that his pillow, though his pillowcase wasn't being washed very often, he realized that was probably a source of acne. And so what he did is he washed his pillowcase, and that didn't seem to work. But then he did something special with the product that he used to wash the pillowcase, and it seemed to really help clear up his acne. So he came up with a formulation to basically ingest into material a formulation, and which is a really unique concept. Well, he got all the way through, and he walked onto the stage, and of course, the better the story, the better, the better props, the better, you have, is probably higher likelihood that you'll get selected. And he came on, and he was on the show. He went through all 3 different phases and got on the show. And so the big doors are opened up, and he came through with a toilet, and he said, "Good evening, sharks. My name is blah, blah, blah." And then he put his head in the toilet. Talk about good TV. It was phenomenal TV, right? And he talked about his new product, and he got a deal. Yes, he got a deal. Excuse me. And sorry that I just forgot about that. But he so it was very exciting. They contacted me after all that. I was not aware of them. They found out about me through a different circle, and they wanted to have me help them distribute the product and that type of thing. And they were about 3 months out from being aired, maybe 2 months. And so I came in, I said, "Okay, well, what's plan B in case you don't get on the show?" "Oh no, we're going to get on the show." No, not necessarily. Plan B. What's plan B? And they said, "No, we don't have any." I said, "You have to have a plan B because sometimes you get cut, whether you get a deal or not." And in fact, excuse me, they had a deal, but it didn't materialize. That doesn't always mean you're not going to be on it or not. And I'll explain that in a minute. But so they were very confident they were going to get on the show. And plus, it's great TV. Put your head in a toilet. And I said, "No, you can't count on that." Well, they had ordered 35,000 units of their pillowcases that was infused with this special medicinal quality. Been approved by the FDA, patent pending, all that, all the good stuff. Everything was in place there. I said, and plus they had it in a cute package, which should have been flat because the cute package was squared. And so it takes up more room. And you have to think about that when it's being distributed. Of course, it was not manufactured in the United States. So it was manufactured overseas, came over, and it took up a significant amount of room in a 3PL in a distribution center. And I mean, a significant amount of room. Anyway, this product could have been packaged very neatly, very, like a little square, but get closer and closer. And they really wanted, so we were talking about the distribution plans and the marketing plans. And I said, "We got to come up with plan B." No. And I said, "We're not meeting eye to eye. We got to, this is where it's not working out here, So I moved on. Sure enough, 4 days before the show was supposed to be aired, it was cut. It was this particular young man's product. This was cut on the editing room floor. And I could just visualize. Well, they showed me actually, because they got a clip of it. They showed me what it was, and it was just great TV. But for whatever reason, they just decided to cut it. And it was, so they had 35,000 units sitting in a distribution model. They did come back and ask me to come work with them again. And I declined just because I had some ideas and it didn't work for them. So, but that is a classic story of you do have to plan for plan B. You could plan to be on it, and the likelihood of you being on it is much greater if you do get a deal, but not always. You see how many people don't get deals and they walk off, and but that doesn't mean you're going to be on it. And so you always have to plan. What are you going to do? How are you going to prepare for this onslaught of orders? Because that's what happens when you're on. You get this exposure. In fact, that's also been suggested by a few of the sharks. If you come on and you're well invested, you're moving along, you've got millions of sales and or millions of customers, why are you here? And Damon John, who's one of the sharks, often calls people out and said, you're here just for actually, so does Mark Cuban. They both call out potential shark investees if they're there just to get the publicity. So make sure if you go, you really do want, and why do you want them? And there's a lot of reasons why people want them. And most of us creators, entrepreneurs, get to a certain point, a certain threshold, and you do need more mentoring. You need more leadership. You need more funding. You need somebody to talk about things with and to bounce things off of. So it is a good place to go to see if somebody, your moonshot is what it is. So that young man though has moved on, and he actually has a wonderful company, and they infuse medicinal qualities like into socks for diabetics with open wounds. I mean, so he's done very well, but the pillowcases didn't. So, that's a loss. And he's a young man, very young. I mean, he was 23 or 4 or something like that. So he has a lot of room to make up those losses. And that's what I tell my children. You're young, you can take some risks. Whereas somebody in my 60s like myself, you have to be a little more cautious about your risk taking. So, and then Shark Tank, as I mentioned, Lori Grenier is a customer of mine, and she's called my product from zero to hero because it helps other. So that was a great social. And she wasn't she didn't know. I never told her that I even applied to Shark Tank. I just tracked her down when she had some surgery and gave her our products. But Shark Tank is a great opportunity for manufacturers. It's very exciting. It takes a tremendous amount of your time, but you really can. You do learn a lot. You're standing in line for hours with people, and you get to know people. And you look up and down the line, and you realize that somebody in this line, 2 or 3 people, are probably going to get on Shark Tank because they had open call auditions. Of course, they didn't do that during COVID. Those were then taped, and you sent them in. Some of the most powerful stories are when these 3 children, well, one was a young woman, she was in college, and 2 children, her 2 siblings that were in high school, but their mother had died of cancer, and then years before, but their dad raised them, and he's a firefighter, and he also came up with a great product, a kitchen product, and it was a carving board and with a unique concept to it. And he was a firefighter. He was also a firefighter in New York City who responded to the 9/11 tragedy, and he ended up getting cancer, and he was accepted to come on to Shark Tank with his story, but he died. And the 3 children came on in honor of their dad, remarkably composed, and showed them their product. And it was a wooden carving, wooden cutting board, and with unique channels and that type of thing. All 5 sharks got together the first time this ever happened, and each put in $100,000 and then gave 10% back to the foundation for the 9/11 survivors, and for those that are, of course, experiencing cancer or any of the other horrible maladies that they had from getting to trying to find the survivors of 9/11. But that was probably one of the most memorable shows, and that was the time that all 5 sharks. Another person that came on was the founder of Ring. We all know Ring, and none of the sharks bit, none of them. they thought it was a silly product. And of course, then they were bought out by Amazon for $1 billion, billion. And he ended up coming back on as a shark, a guest shark, which was just really fun. That was a really fun thing too. So there's the owner of Spanx, the owner of Skinny Girl, the owner of Kind Bars. A lot of them have been guest sharks, and those have been fun because they add just an extra little flair. Matt Higgins, that's an interesting story. His background came up from nothing to a huge investment firm. And so he was on Shark Tank. He's got a book out called Burn the Boats, which is actually a very good book, by the way. Don't have plan B, just go for it is basically the bottom line, but it's a good book. He's been a guest shark. And so it's a great opportunity for manufacturers. I mean, and there have been people, lots of kitchen items, and Lori Grenier is very good with HSN and QVC. And then Barbara Corcoran has made her fortune in real estate, and she's done very well with smaller mom and pop products. They're anything from a lobster truck, which then expanded to mini trucks across the Eastern Seaboard, to Grace and Lace, which is a boot topper and a faith-based company, and they've done millions, well, tens of millions now. A lot of baby products, and then there's some that are doing well, who, don't need the money. There are some that, and then when the reruns come back, that's another little lift for people. They're seeing it again. The other element is, even if you don't get on it, or you don't get a deal, you still get a lift of sales typically, but you have to be careful about that, as I mentioned. So there's a lot of opportunity for manufacturers, a lot of food products lately. So if you're manufacturing a food product, just go back and before you go on Shark Tank, you just binge watch for an entire week all the shows, because the questions they ask are the questions that they're going to ask you. And the number one question is your CAC, customer acquisition cost. That's the number one. Obviously, your profit and your sales and your revenue. But if you don't know your customer acquisition costs, they're not going to invest in you, because you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business well enough, and they don't want to educate people. Oftentimes they get, they call themselves greedy when they have they come back with an offer at 30, 40, 50%. There have been times when people want to buy, one of the sharks I remember one where they wanted to buy the inventor out completely 100%. And a couple times, I think one time that worked and another time it didn't. And then Robert Herkovich is another one, and he's immigrant from Poland. His dad immigrated, so he's got a real fondness for immigrants. But he doesn't, just because you're immigrated from another country, he gets very emotional about it, but he doesn't always invest. Damon John really likes the scrappy, come from the hood. Mark Cuban, this was a fascinating where the inventor came in, but she came in with this entourage of zombies, and they were really creepy creatures, and they would come up and make icky noises in the Shark Tank. They were ugly and scary. Well, what she did is she produces these scary shows, and she was in LA and was asking for $1 million, and of course all the sharks were like, oh, for crying out loud. Then she started talking about her numbers and how well she did, and she wanted to expand, and how it costs money. Well, Mark Cuban invested, which was really interesting. And after they left, they asked him why. And he said, and this is before the pandemic, and he said, people are going to want experiences. We're getting too isolated, and they're going to want experiences. And I just thought that was a brilliant assessment of our future, even back then. And this was probably 2018, I think. And so it was before the pandemic. And of course, they film, and 6 months later, you're on. So I always look at when something was created, when the show was produced, because I watch a lot of the reruns. And I've not checked to see how well they're doing. And sometimes they fall apart, the deals fall apart. And there's a number of different blogs that follow the Shark Tank show, and they do an update if it's in business or not. And there was one company where a couple were recently married, and they were expecting their first child. They were a blended family. However, they both had previous marriages. Well, they came up with a little stuffed gray elephant. And because if you come, you know, there's always the elephant in the room that hasn't been talked about. So they came up with a little elephant, but they spent $65,000 to create this little elephant. And the sharks just said, this is just ridiculous, because you can just pick one up.
Yeah.
You just buy it off of, Amazon, or there's no reason for it. And so nobody invested, and the business fell apart. And they believed in it completely 100%, but they didn't do enough. They didn't do the focus group studies. They didn't do market research. They didn't try it out first before investing a lot of money. I often, when they ask inventors and or business owners, which are often the same, the questions about their financials, I always ask myself the same questions about my business. And I know my business has gotten much better. And I can answer the questions a lot better now as I've matured in my business and as I've become profitable. It's pretty important to be profitable. They're very impressed with profitable companies, not companies that get an infusion of cash, but profitable companies. Kevin O'Leary is another Shark Tank investor. And by the way, all the names I've mentioned about the Sharks have all become executive producers of the show as well, that's fascinating. That's evolved over time. And Kevin O'Leary has this very gruff, shoot it behind the barn kind of demeanor. But he definitely sees opportunity, and he bought Love Pop, which are the greeting cards. When you open them, they're little paper that comes out, and he bought Love Pop, and he's got this huge bridal network now through different investments from Shark Tank. So he's got this real soft spot for weddings and people and the pup, but he knows what to do. And they all have teams of people that, of course, help. So I think those are all interesting stories to pay attention to they each have their very different, unique ways of presenting on Shark Tank and investing. And Lori is without a doubt the queen of QVC and HSN, but the other sharks have gotten on as well. Interestingly, because Bed Bath & Beyond just went bankrupt and they closed their stores just in the last 2 months. Interesting what happened with those products if they ended up, because Lori had a huge relationship with Bed Bath & Beyond, and so did all of her investors had their products. And Scrub Daddy is her number one product. He was a stay-at-home dad and came up with this new sponge. It was a new scrub sponge. And I think they're at 150 million in sales every year now. So great stories. Some of the products that my daughter uses for her son, who's 2, have been on Shark Tank. I mean, just, and you'd probably be surprised. And I often buy items to give as gifts when I think, oh my gosh, this is a great idea as a gift. And I give them as gifts. Of course, everybody knows I just love manufacturers and inventions and that type of thing. So if it applies, it's a good one. There was another one this was an interesting one where she and her mother have it's bug off. It looks like a syringe. You get a bug bite, and you take it looks like a syringe, and you take the syringe and you suck out the bug venom that makes you itch, and it works like a charm. And I bought it because I'm from Minnesota originally, so I sent it to all my Minnesota friends. They thought that was great, but they had an exclusive distribution deal from the inventor of that. And that was the first time I've ever seen that, an exclusive distribution, and they just blew it up. And then they ended up buying it out from the original manufacturer, I believe. There was another one that Lori Grenier invested in. A mother and son came on, and it was a raised pedestal where you put your feet on when you're on the bathroom, and they called it Squatty Potty. That has done another $100 million also. And everybody laughed about it, but it has been a huge seller. So you just never know. You just never know. And so these are just fun stories, and these are Shark Tank tales. And if you have any questions, Jason, or anybody wants to, email me and ask me, it's a great, only in America, really. Only in America. There is a show in Canada that's called Dragon's Den, and that's where this idea came from, by the way.
Sounds like if you ever had a weekend free, do Shark Tank binging.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, it's always on CNBC, and then you can always go on YouTube also. But so I hope this is a fun episode for everybody, and just to get kind of a quick overview. Never been on studio, just went through the process 3 different times. And I have thought about going a 4th time, but just for fun. In fact, I believe my company started the same year that Shark Tank started. So that would be like a little hook that I would have. So because my company's 14 and a half years old, and I believe they're 14 years old. So
cool. Yeah. Definitely for TV's interest, that would be something for us business people to be looking at, pay attention
absolutely to. Oh yeah, it really honed some of my financials. I look at financials now and say, what would these look like to it? What would it look like to an investor? And then when I invest in companies, I look at very similarly. Oh, one thing I wanted to point out is probably 1/3 of all deals that we see on TV never materialize. Even though they got a deal, they didn't materialize. It falls through in the due diligence. And so if there's a problem, if the numbers were inaccurately represented, deal's done. And sometimes there's patents they say they received, they didn't. Sometimes they say they have POs, they don't, that type of thing. So
that's actually a higher rate than, at least from my experience in helping clients exit businesses and or buy businesses. I'd say about 60-70% of them don't get through the offer due diligence stage. So
okay, interesting.
That's actually a higher percentage, just my own experience thing. So yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so I hope this was fun.
And then one quick note, next week will be a repeat or a rerun of our first episode with Aaron Moher going through Profit First, the masterclass on Profit First. So
yes,
we'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Yep, June 5th. All right. Bye, everybody. Happy